Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about a little bit of an update from the kind of behind the scenes structure of the NCAA. It seems like the Power Four could be heading for self governance going forward, and definitely would be a wildly altering thing to college sports. So definitely something that we will unpack as it kind of goes down the train tracks and possibly gets closer to reality. But let's get into helmet communication because it's something that I've known it's coming for quite some time. I think all of us, there's so many changes going on that maybe you didn't know that this was coming. But the reality is it is one of the biggest changes that is coming this upcoming year. I understand that everyone is going towards the conference changes and the playoff, and all of that stuff is going to be very transformative. But if we're talking about the pure football effect, there is nothing that affects it more than this. And it's definitely something that is going to define college football in this year in particular, and especially going forward over the next couple of years. So we'll get into this, and I think the biggest thing here is there's so much that we don't see, right? There's so much that we don't know about what's going on the football field. And all of that has to be relayed into the players before snap. All of that stuff has to be in their mind and ready to roll by the time the ball is snapped. We used to do signs, as you can see right there, and definitely would be a way that some might go this season. It's something that I kind of want to get to into right here. And it comes from CJ Vogel, who is over at On Texas Football. They do a fantastic job covering the Horns if you are a Texas fan out there. But he was talking about Brent Venables' comments on the helmet communications and how it kind of changes the sport and the different ways they've loved it, the different ways they've not so much liked it. And one of the things he touched on was just how incredible it is to have the tablets on the sideline, mainly because it used to be you would get 4 still images from the play that you could look over, but that only gives you so much. You can only see so much, and you can only see how he goes through his progression so much, that type of thing. So that was obviously a huge boost, even on the defensive side of the ball. You get to see how the play develops, how certain receivers run their routes, that type of thing. So he spoke very glowingly about that. He did say there was the other possibility where sometimes it's a little bit too much communication. Sometimes you're getting in this guy's ear and kind of he's short circuiting. He's not fully understanding what you're saying, or he's just getting like a little bit caught up in the moment and can't process all the information that they're being given all at one time. So that's going to be a really interesting thing is how confident are you in that middle linebacker to disseminate all the information you need to do and to possibly diagnose a play and make a play without anyone else's help. And that's something else that they kind of touched on where hypothetically there's a world where some defenses outplay offenses with this new moniker. Now, I think that offenses tend to have the advantage here, but just in general, if you have a really good middle linebacker, let's say Danny Stutzman, for example, a very veteran guy that pretty much can make every single play on the field, Brent Venables can get in that guy's ear and say, if they do an orbit motion from the left right here, it's going to be a screen pass out to that guy, and I want you to, get there early. And that's something that you can do. And if you have a veteran guy there that has done his film tape, that knows exactly how this is going to go and knows the timing of everything, he's going to blow that play up before it starts. And I think that's the biggest thing here is who is the aggressor? Who is the better of the two between the quarterback and the middle linebacker? Who is the more experienced? Who has the better relationship with their coach, which is something we'll get into here in a second. All of that stuff really matters, and it's something that is going to be really interesting to watch, on top of the linebacker having to communicate all of this stuff, which is pretty much second nature to an NFL player, but is not necessarily as easy for a college kid to disseminate all of that information to the secondary and then to the D line, because when they were testing this last year, they had one in the D line's head, they had one in the linebackers, they had one in the safeties, and that made it so much easier for everyone to be on the same page, for everyone to have everyone aligned, and not have to communicate with 10 guys. You only have to communicate with 3 or 4 guys on your specific position group. That's a huge difference and will definitely be something that will define this a lot. How good is your linebacker at disseminating information? How good is your quarterback at disseminating information? And if he's not so good, they just go back to those big cards with 4 different things on them and you figure out what the play call is from there. So it's one of those things that is going to be transformative for so many teams and definitely going to change the way, especially high-level football, the Power 4 conferences and all of those teams play football. It's totally going to transform that. it's also going to transform the way that some other schools handle it. Maybe they don't lean into it as much, at least this initial year, and maybe they go back to the tried and true, holding up those signs and trying to figure out a play call. So it's very interesting. It's definitely something that will be a case by case basis based on how good is your quarterback at getting the information out to the people that he needs it to, or your linebacker doing that, whatever have you. There's a ton of things that could go wrong during that process, and maybe you go to the tried and true method of just signing things in. But that'll be really interesting to watch. Definitely will be fascinating to see who leans on this aggressively, who kind of shies away just a little bit. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about was something that was brought up on the Unnecessary Roughness podcast, brought up by Brandon Walker, who I assume some of you are not the biggest fans of. I tend to enjoy him, but that's beside the point. I think he's someone that is definitely very outspoken, but he was talking about this on his podcast and basically said college coaches don't treat their players the same way NFL coaches do, because there's a certain error in NFL world where the head coach is getting paid less than the quarterback. The head coach is getting paid less than the middle linebacker, and you need those guys to stick around. You need those guys intact for your future, and college football is a little bit different. You're able to be a little bit more aggressive towards these guys and, yell just a little bit more, and because if things go wrong and that guy doesn't respond very well, maybe you just go get another one from the portal. So that's definitely a really interesting kind of thing here, and it adds the biggest dynamic to this, if I'm being totally honest, which is how comfortable are you with your quarterback and your coach? How comfortable do you feel that they're on the exact same page, that they know exactly what the other is saying, and that they won't get into a fight on the sideline because they were communicating wrong, or because the coach was yelling in his ear, what have you. There are certain things that could go wrong, and it comes down to how close is that play caller or that person in the headset and the guy receiving that information. And that's going to be really the biggest separator, if I'm being totally honest. I think that's the thing that you're going to find out. How well is Kane Womack is coming into Bama? How well can he disseminate information to Deontay Lawson? And does it make sense with Deontay Lawson? Does he respond to that, and could it cause problems for them? Kalen DeBoer and Jalen Milroe, the exact same thing. And I think there's a lot of different examples of this. So maybe it leans more towards the Quinn Ewers or the Carson Becks of the world, who have been with the same offensive coordinator for 2 years, 3 years now, and have kind of developed that relationship with them and know exactly what they're saying, and they don't necessarily get into those arguments as easily. And does it lean away from guys like Dylan Gabriel and Will Howard, who transferred into new programs and have to develop that relationship with their play caller before they go on the field? So that's kind of a little side point that might seem kind of trivial at this point, might seem like something that really won't change too much at the end of the day, but I really think it might. I think it's one of those things that maybe we don't see it on Saturdays. Maybe we don't see a guy, go to the sideline and slam his helmet down and start screaming at his head coach. I don't necessarily expect that to happen, but it could be that in film room or in behind the scenes at practice, there is a little bit of frustration that bubbles up, and you never want your play caller and your quarterback, or your play caller and your linebacker, to be on different pages. That is the biggest thing in college sports, is to make sure that not only are you disseminating that information and putting in the right call and doing all that in a very quick amount of time, but you're doing it not tearing this guy down, and you're not doing it in a way that kind of ruins that relationship that you have. So that's obviously going to be something that is going to be really, really interesting to watch. It might not necessarily show itself too much on Saturdays, but it's definitely something that will define this, and definitely something that could change the way that this is used going forward. But at the end of the day, it's one of those things that I think when we came into this year, we were looking at it as very transformative, very different, and something that would totally change the way that quarterbacks especially kind of played this game. And we leaned totally towards the offense when we were talking about this. And I tend to agree. I still tend to agree that a great offense beats a great defense 9 times out of 10. And that's kind of the way that it's kind of bared itself out over the last couple of years in college football. So I think that's something that I tend to believe this does lean more in the offense's direction at the end of the day. It doesn't change that on a case-by-case basis, you could have a middle linebacker that is more talented, a better communicator, all of those things than the quarterback is. And that would give him a huge step up to be able to diagnose plays before they happen, or see a certain motion from the X receiver or from the Y and be able to see exactly what's going to happen before it happens. So that's kind of the tightrope they're walking here. Is, first of all, you got to pick the right guy to have that green dot. You got to pick the guy that is going to be one of the better communicators on the team, is going to get that information out as quickly and as efficiently as possible. You have to make sure that the connection between him and his defensive coordinator or his offensive coordinator is as strong as you think it is, because cracks start to form pretty quickly if there is anything that could go wrong in these kind of situations. So definitely something that you're going to have to absolutely make sure of, that Steve Sarkisian and Quinn Ewers are absolutely on the same page, and they absolutely will not take offense if Steve Sarkisian is a little aggressive through that mic. So I think that's kind of the big things here. There's so many different implications when you talk about all of the different things that could happen because of this. I think it's going to elevate the level of football at the highest level of this sport. I think it's going to be much more of a chess match between the play callers, and it's going to be really, really fun to watch who is separating themselves as the play caller this upcoming year. But at the end of the day, there are hurdles. There are a ton of things that need to get in place, and there are definitely some places around the country, I can almost promise you, that don't have it where they want to have it right now. So it'll be really interesting to see, who really leans into this. Who is the team that absolutely uses this for every single play? Is there a team that doesn't use this much at all? And they kind of lean more toward the signs and that type of thing, just because it's easier to get that to all 11 people at the same time than going through one guy to get it out to everyone. So it's going to be fascinating to watch, that's for sure. But it's one of those changes that has kind of gone under the radar with all of the other things that have been happening in the sport this offseason. But it's one of those that is going to be one of the most defining, and definitely will be just incredible to watch unfold. But we'll take our third break here, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the hinge players in the Big Ten. We did the SEC, now we'll do the Big Ten, and this one's a little bit more straightforward, just because the Big Ten's a little bit more straightforward than the SEC this upcoming year. But we'll break down those players I have for you right after this, so stick with us.